So, two issues jump at me from the last week. The first is the Natasha Akpoti tango with the Senate president. And it's a distraction, and I mean it's a distraction. It wasn't about anything to do with the interest of the Nigerian people. It had nothing to do with the people, good people of Kogi, who have now been deprived of the beautiful representation of their beautiful queen, Natasha. I'm sure she would have at different points said things intended for the welfare of the good people of Kogi, but I doubt that even she or the ones listening to her within the chamber really cared much about any of that. And when they are busy sharing the largesse, I've not heard of any one of them complaining about the sick gap between them and the people they purport to rule, but whom they in truth afflict. So it is in that sense that I will say to you that it's a squabble amongst them and it's none of our business. But in reality, it's actually our business, because what you see is how they have managed to open up at least a little window into how governance or ruination works in the country Nigeria. There are 4 senators, female senators in the entire Senate. For good or for bad, one of them has come up with an allegation of sexual harassment. I hold no brief as to the, shall I say, seriousness of these charges in terms of the kind of evidence she might have available to back up her claim. But in a male-dominated environment where you had such a horrible allegation placed against what is essentially the number 3 poncho when it comes to the affliction of the Nigerian, and institutionally, the Nigerian Senate was pressed into Akpabio's service and became the fig leaf for an emperor who is patently naked. But again, that is the nature of power in Nigeria. And that threw up one very interesting joke on Twitterville and Sukersburgville. Please, I've seen it dotting the streets of the internet, Nigernet generally. And the supposition is that we have a very easy demarcation or separation of powers in Nigeria, that all things judiciary have been delegated to the wicked one that sits in Abuja, and that all things legislative have been given to Nakodia, the Senate president, and of course, the BAT decides what happens in the executive. This simplistic oversimplification of our reality is actually, unfortunately, as true as it gets. Because even though it might seem like a rather simplistic conclusion to draw, the reality suggests that it is actually the truth of our situation. So that was part of what the last week has shown us. Natasha Naxing spilling over into the reality of how power is actually held or separated or not separated in Nigeria. And then the last of these things that has happened in the week that was is something that is completely out of the hand of every mortal, and that is a function of living. Everybody dies eventually. Everybody. We may live long or we may not. We may gather wealth, we may not. But the one thing that is certain is that everyone born of a woman will die eventually. Egbon, Dr. Doyinsola Opupe died on Friday morning, I believe. Yeah. At least I got the news on Friday morning. He was a man I knew in the public space, and I did not get to know him personally until I received a call from him informing me of my nomination to be part of the Obi campaign. It was the first time I ever spoke with him. He didn't last long in the role, and I didn't work with him, so I really did not develop any personal relationship of any sort with him. Our politics have never been the same, but we share the common affliction of our human. And this is what I would want each and every one of us to focus on, even as we may disagree with his politics. He is dead. He is beyond your judgment. He is beyond mine. Whatever we might have had to say to him, I believe should have anything negative you might have to say to him. I'm not counseling, do not speak ill of the dead. I speak ill of the living and the dead every day of the day. But there comes a point where you begin to ask some questions. Dr. Okupe knew he was dying, and he still embraced the kind of position that he embraced. Let history be the judge. Please allow the bitterness to go. At some point, it was a part and parcel of the quest for change in Nigeria. Let's respect that, and let's not allow bitterness to become engendered to the point where men point at what you have to say or what you have had to say in this season. I'm not asking you to be blackmailed. If you will talk, stick with the facts and the truth. Do not abuse this place. Thank you very much. This week, I'd love us to talk to a subject that had been on my mind for a while. Indeed, I found that I had spoken to something similar, but not exactly the same. Almost a year ago, about 11 months ago, I spoke. I said, Nigeria, where are the elders? Something along those lines. But this is not about elders. I'm not interested in elders this morning. I'm talking about fathers. And I said Nigeria, the fatherless country. Who is the father? Because if I would look to a country, Nigeria, and then call it a fatherless country, this is in an environment where people speak to fatherland or motherland in relation to the country of their birth. But in my own case, I am saying unequivocally that the Nigerian is fatherless because the country itself is fatherless. But for you to understand whether Nigeria has a father or not, in the true sense of the word, father, we must begin to ask ourselves, who is a father? Now, it is critical that we understand that a father may be biological, it may be spiritual. But since this is not exactly your church where somebody is throwing demand for faith at you, since this is essentially a classroom where we must necessarily deal with empirical facts, we must ask ourselves, who is a father? Okay, so if you must go to the dictionary, it will probably tell you that a father is a male parent, who contributes to the conception of a child.